I've never willfully viewed pornography, but I've seen it by accident many times on the internet. Most people have. Purveyors design it to pop up when you misspell a search word or have it lingering on the side of your page when you look up an obscure movie review or song lyrics. What about children? How many times have children done the same thing and seen those same images without you knowing it? Kristen Jenson of Richland, Washington, is a pornography expert and says the average age when most children first encounter online pornography is 11. She's got a master's degree in organizational communication and became very interested in pornography and how it affects the brain when a friend's child was ensnared by addiction. She's co-authored a book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Porn-Proofing Today's Young Kids, and now runs a blog giving advice to parents called pornproofkids.com. Kristen, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Andrew, for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you today.
Tell me what motivated you to write the book.
Well, as you said, it was really a friend's experience. Late one night, about 3 years ago, I got a phone call from a very distraught mother. She had a large family. She was religious. She was homeschooling her kids, trying to protect them from the world, the big bad world out there. But she found out that her 17-year-old son had been viewing pornography. He really had become addicted to it. And not only that, he had started acting out with his siblings, about 5 of his younger siblings. So, of course, he was prosecuted. He had to leave the home. All those kids had to go through a lot of counseling, and it was just a huge mess. So after we talked till late in the night, I woke up the next morning, and I just had this question in my head, like, who will warn the young children? We hear about teenagers being warned about pornography or talked to about pornography, but what about younger children? Because it seemed like they were getting exposed. So being a person that's never really had an original idea in my life, I decided, well, there has to be a book or a couple of books out there.
Sure.
I had seen books on stranger dangers and all kinds of things like that. So I went online and I started searching, and I couldn't find anything that you could read or help to educate a young child about how their brain was affected by pornography and how it could actually become an addiction. So I just felt compelled to begin researching and writing it myself, and I spent about 3 years doing that and getting it published.
And what is different about teaching a child about pornography than a teenager or an adult?
Well, first of all, you have to be really careful. You don't want to give them too much information. I have talked to many experts in this field, people that know a lot about pornography and how it affects the brain, and they'll tell me, I don't know how to talk to my 6-year-old about this. I have all this information, but how do you translate it to the level of a child without overwhelming them or scaring them? So you don't want to do that. So I think that teenagers, they've seen a lot of this already. And they also know about sex. So young children, we designed the book so that you could read it to a 4-year-old, so that you could read it to a child that hasn't had the sex talk. And from all the feedback we've received, I think we've really done a good job at that. So it makes the parent feel very comfortable to open a dialogue about this very important topic before the child gets exposed or gets really interested in seeking it out.
And your blog suggests to teach children the definition of pornography, help them understand the difference between maybe a bikini picture and pornography. What is that definition? What is the difference between an image in, say, an R-rated movie or an explicit music video and something that really is truly pornography?
That's a very good question. We get into, okay, what is the definition of pornography? And that's really hard because for a 7-year-old, an underwear ad from Victoria's Secret could be pornography. So in the book, we give a very simple definition that's just a beginning definition. You have to start somewhere. So in the book, we say it means pictures, videos, or even cartoons of people with little or no clothes on. And we try to differentiate it from maybe what you might see in a science book or something like that. That pornography focuses on the parts of the body that we keep covered by a swimsuit. So it's very gentle, but it gets across the information. But more importantly, in the book, we talk about how it makes the child feel. Because pornography is very confusing to a child. It can make them feel excited in a physical way. It can also make them feel really disgusted. So they're confused by those feelings, and they're also often ashamed, and they don't want to tell their parents. So many kids won't go tell their parents. And I have met so many adults that became addicted, and it began when they were 6 or 7 or even 5. And they never told their parents. So getting back to your question about what is pornography, to a child, it's whatever excites them and causes them to seek out more sexualized imagery.
And you put a big emphasis on teaching children to understand why it is it's exciting them. You use the word mirror neurons.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the development of a child's brain and the role of mirror neurons as these children see these images.
Yes, that's really important to understand that a child's brain is physiologically very different than an adult's brain. And that is why they are so much more vulnerable to seeing sexualized media. Mirror neurons. Children have an abundance of these specialized kinds of neurons. And what they do is they help a child feel like they are experiencing what they see. So why do they have these? It helps them imitate adult behavior. It helps them be able to grow up and do the things that they're going to need to learn to do as adults. Have you ever had the experience of, and maybe when you yourself was a child or with your own children, watching a movie, and to you it wasn't particularly terrifying, but to them they're freaked out and they have nightmares?
Yeah, with my kids, anything they see in a movie suddenly is real life an hour later.
Exactly. So that is because they have these mirror neurons. So not only do kids get more affected and by that experience of what they view, but they also begin to imitate it. So kids watch a movie with, swashbuckling. They find something and pretend it's a sword and they're sword fighting. And that's just what children do and how they're made up. But it really backfires when it comes to pornography, because then children are pulled into it more readily than an adult. And not only they have these mirror neurons, but they have an immature prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of the brain that helps a child, helps an adult really, put the brakes on their appetites, make good decisions, exercise self-control. And it's very immature in a child. And when you put that together with mirror neurons, you've got the perfect storm of a child that's pulled into pornography and doesn't have the brain power in their prefrontal cortex, or we call it the thinking brain in Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, to really turn away and say, I can't do that. So we stress a lot in the book ways to strengthen that part of the brain for a child and help the child strengthen their thinking brain.
Now, with words that children shouldn't use, if they're young enough, you can just say, don't use that word. And then there gets to be a certain point where maybe we need to talk to the child about what that word means and why they shouldn't use that word. And then, a little bit older kids, when we're talking about teenagers, 11, 13, they understand the use of those words. And so then the conversation about why we don't use that words might be different. Is it the same thing with images? At a certain age, is it okay to just say, forget you saw that? Should you always talk to kids about images they've seen? Do you talk to a 4-year-old different than a 7-year-old, different than an 11-year-old? Does that matter as the children develop?
So, for example, I'm assuming you're asking if a child sees a pornographic image or sees something online.
You know
they did. The main thing with a child is to help them process those feelings. So I would never say, well, just forget those feelings or forget that, because it's very difficult for a child to forget a pornographic image. And that's another thing we talk about in the book, which is helping children learn cognitive skills so that those images fade and don't have power over them. So I believe it's really important, no matter what the age of the child, to fully address it, to make sure you check in with them, to make sure that they fully are able to express their feelings about the images that they've seen. And you can assure them that, you wish they wouldn't have had to see those things, that you'll try to protect them from seeing those things in the future, and that those images are not really what love is all about and what that kind of a relationship. And that's the thing also about pornography, is that it teaches kids the wrong message about what sex is all about. It gives them a very different view than what most parents, I think, would want their children to grow up believing about that part of their life as they grow up and become adults.
Sure. And the big emphasis of your book, the reason why you want everyone to read the book, is to porn-proof your kids, to address the issue before they've seen anything, to prepare them, arm them with tools in case they see these things. What do you define as porn-proofing someone? What does that mean?
Well, I like to think of it as being an immunization. When you think about smallpox, smallpox actually would rage in armies, and soldiers would get smallpox and just pass it on. And did you know that I've read that more soldiers were killed by smallpox than by battle?
Yeah, wow.
So how do we eradicate smallpox? It was through immunization of young, healthy people that had not yet been exposed to it. And so that's the model I'm using. I think pornography has become a pandemic. It's very dangerous to young minds, and it's very toxic to them. And I believe that the only way we can turn this around is through immunizing them. So that means giving them a definition early on so they know that there's this danger and it's out there. We talk to kids about drugs. We talk to kids about all kinds of other dangers. This is also a danger we need to add to that list. So giving them a definition, opening that conversation is really important for parents. Kids encounter this. It's out there and it's confusing to them. And if their parents aren't talking to them, then they get this message that, oh, we don't talk about this. But if their parents will open up a conversation and say, hey, there's this danger out there. I'm going to tell you about it because I love you, and I'm going to try to protect you, and I'm going to help you deal with it. And we're all on this team together, and we're going to bring it out into the light, and we're not going to be ashamed about it. It's a danger, and we're just going to talk to you so that you can protect your brain.
I've been really struggling with this issue since I first looked at your blog. What's going in my mind is something going on with my 7-year-old right now. When he gets mad at his mother, my wife, he will go for a walk around the block. And scared, my wife has to go get in her car and go look for him. Where did you go? Come back to the house right now. And she wants to teach him about abduction in order to help him understand why we can't just go walk around the block by ourselves at age 7. And I feel like that is too scary of a topic for too young of a child, that we need to teach a child an important concept about a real danger that exists in the world, but they're still young enough. We don't want to let them know about some of the nightmares that adults know about, some of the really bad things that adults are familiar with, but we want to shield our kids from it. What you're saying is that we really need to prepare children for some of the terrible things they're going to see online, and you have to sacrifice that preservation of innocence in order to do that teaching. What do you say to parents who preserving that innocence was one of what they think it's one of the important jobs of parenting?
Yes, I totally understand that. And in fact, in the introduction to our book, we say, why we're not crazy for wanting you to talk to a 7-year-old basically about pornography. The world out there, there's so much sexualized media, you can't control it anymore. So a few weeks ago, I got a message from a friend in Idaho. She'd just heard about a 5-year-old that she knew of that was on the school bus when a 3rd grader with his smartphone showed this 5-year-old hardcore pornography.
And that probably happens all over the country.
All the time.
All the time.
So you can say, well, I'm going to preserve my child's innocence. You may not already know they've already seen this stuff and they're struggling and wondering how to deal with it. And I've had several parents who have read the book to their children, never knowing, never thinking that their children had ever seen anything. And through the course of reading them the book, they find out that, yes, their kids have seen pornography on the internet, maybe at a friend's house, maybe at a family member's house, maybe on the school ground. So in this day and age, it doesn't seem to be, we don't have that luxury anymore because of the way society is and the way media is. We just don't have that luxury anymore of saying, I won't tell my kids about this until they're 12. And then I'll let them know. It's really important to teach them. And I think in Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, we've really done it in a very gentle way. And so most parents that I've heard from, in fact, I've never heard a parent read the book and say, oh, it made me uncomfortable. No, all of them are just so happy that there's a resource that helps them have this conversation with their kids in a gentle way, in a non-threatening way, and so that the kids feel empowered. And that's the response we're getting. Kids actually like to be trusted. They like to be empowered, and they're not so worried about, your worries. Your worries is maintaining their innocence. And I think that while that's a nice goal, unfortunately, I just don't see that it's possible today anymore to do that, to have that control over what they see. So better be prepared, right? Because what's happened is kids have been exposed. They don't tell their parents. They get interested in this. They sneak down to the computer at night or get on your iPad and seek out this sexualized media, and they get hooked. I have people that have, come to me and say, I started looking at this when I was 7, and I got an addiction, and it wasn't until my mid-30s that I was able to be free from it, and my mother to this day doesn't know anything about it. So that's kind of shocking.
And you mentioned in a previous conversation that the technology doesn't keep up with, that the research doesn't keep up with the technology. Mm-hmm. We were talking about what the average age children are when they first encounter pornography, and that study was done years before the tablet was invented. And now there's a whole range of tablets available, several different companies that are in the hands of children. Do you find often that people are unaware, both scientifically and anecdotally, for how much exposure their children really have?
Yes, and parents that are well informed in many other aspects are often not as informed as far as technology. For example, some parents don't realize that if their kids have a Kindle Fire in their hands, they have a portal to the internet. If they have an Xbox 360, they have a portal to the internet. And so children have so much accessibility through mobile devices mostly now. And that's just changed within the last few years. This study I mentioned was 2004. So think about that. I believe the iPhone came out in 2005, and I believe the iPad came out in 2010. So think about the profusion of mobile devices for kids.
And did you share with me a stat that said it's easier for children to find hardcore pornography than softcore pornography?
Yeah, Dr. Gail Dines, who is a professor at Wheaton College back in Massachusetts, she's been studying and speaking and writing on this problem. She's the founder of Stop Porn Culture. And she says that one study showed that it takes 15 seconds to find hardcore pornography via a mobile device. It takes 15 minutes if you're just looking for softcore porn. Now,
very scary.
One incident I can tell you that happened in this area a few years back was an 8-year-old girl was given an iPod Touch for her birthday.
Very common story.
And she was also had just been given the sex talk. So what did she do? She's curious. She goes in there and she types in sex into the browser and comes up, of course, with all this horrible stuff and starts viewing it. Well, her parents started noticing that her personality was changing. She seemed to be becoming depressed. She didn't want to go out and play as much. And finally, after 4 or 5 months, they discovered that she had been looking at the most horrific pornography via the iPod Touch.
Wow.
And so she had to go to counseling. And, you know, that girl will never be the same. I mean, it changes a child's brain. And there's new research by Dr. Jennifer Brown. She just came out with a paper that talks about the physiological effects of just innocent exposure to softcore pornography on the developing brain. Did you know that when a child sees just a scantily clad, sexualized woman, maybe, like I said, at the mall or something in a poster, that they actually have a fight or flight response in their brain?
Wow.
It's stressful. It's neurological stress to a child to see those kinds of sexualized imagery. So I think there's more and more science that's going to be coming out on this. We do know that it can become an actual addiction, and we just need to protect our kids so that they have a game plan in place when they encounter it. It's not going to be if, it's going to be when. So let's get them ready.
We're running out of time, but you talk about preparing kids with tools, maybe some mental techniques to help forget an image or help to prepare for what you see. What's an example of a tool that could help a child process something they've seen?
Well, we have, in the book, we called it the Can-Do Plan. C-A-N-D-O. C, close your eyes, because the longer you look at an image, the more it's burned into your memory and the more difficult it is to get rid of. A, alert a trusted adult. Telling someone reduces the shame and the secrecy, and both of those fuel pornography addiction. N is name it when you see it. That engages the thinking brain, and so a child has more power to turn away when they name it. D is distract yourself. When a child sees a pornographic image, it's going to come back to them. That memory keeps popping up in their brain. They need to learn to, every time it pops up, to simply focus on something else that's exciting and interesting, or go do something physical. And as they practice this over and over again, might take 5 or 6 or 10 times, that image will lose its power and start to fade. And O is order the thinking brain to be the boss. That means that you can have this conversation. Feeling brain, which is that emotional part of the brain, that instinctive part of the brain that's really curious about seeing those images. You say, feeling brain, I know you may be curious to view those bad pictures, but I am going to use my thinking brain to stay in charge. So it really gets kids ready with these tools, a stop, drop, and roll plan so they know exactly what to do when they see pornography.
Very good. Very good advice. Kristen Jenson's book is Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Porn-Proofing Today's Young Kids. In Southeast Washington, it is available at Far West Bookstore on Gage Boulevard in Richland.
It's I think it's Kennewick, actually.
Oh, officially Kennewick.
You know, right there on the border.
On the border. In Far West Bookstore, that's west of the Columbia Center Mall, and can be purchased online at Barnes & Noble Bookstore and Amazon.com.
Yep, and we've got about 90 customer reviews there.
All 4 and 5 star.
Yeah, there's one 4-star, but all the rest
That's
are
right,
5-star.
5-star. Very good, very
Yeah.
good. And I can personally recommend the blog, pornproofkids.com. Go check it out today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew.